Welcome to All There Is. I've been listening to voicemails and videos we've received over the last few weeks. They're deeply moving, and I'll be putting together a special episode of the podcast soon, which is made up of them. You can record a video and email it to us if you want. The address is allthereis@cnn.com. You can also message the videos to us on Instagram at allthereis, and you can leave us voicemails at 404-827-1805. We'd love to hear from you. I want to play you a message I heard just this morning.
My name is Grace. One thing I've learned in my grief, now being almost 5 years since my mom died by suicide, I've learned, especially as we're approaching the holidays, that the best place to be on a holiday for me is where there's no expectations of me and where I don't put expectations on myself because I think I have to make a good impression or I think I'm bringing the mood down. And it took me 4.5 years to find it, but I did. She was my high school chemistry teacher, and I've been babysitting her kids. And I go to birthday parties, and I go to Thanksgivings and Christmases, and if I want to talk about my mom, they listen. And if I want to cancel at the last minute, I won't hurt anyone's feelings. By choosing you in your grief on holidays, you may ruffle feathers like I do with my blood family. But for me, on holidays, I feel like those are the days where I let myself just pick me. One thing I'm going to ask, though, someone told me yesterday that they read a book that said the 5th year of grief is hardest. And I responded by telling them every year, at least one person has told me that the year I'm in is the hardest year. The first year is the hardest. The second year is the hardest. The third year is the hardest. And I asked them, what year is the easiest? When will I have the easiest year? And I really hope I haven't already had it because living without my mom for 5 years is just too many. And I know one day I'll surpass her in age, and I'll surpass the time that I had with her, and I don't want to think about that, and I don't know what to do. So if anyone's left a voicemail telling you what year is the easiest, I'd love to know.
It can be hard when you hear others put a timetable on grief or opine on how you should feel or what you should do. I'd never say it gets easy, but it can and does change. It can and does get easier. I think about what Nick Cave said on last week's podcast about the transformation he underwent after his 15-year-old son, Arthur, died.
There was some years, or a year at least, of absolute devastating, incapacitating sorrow. At the time, you think that it's simply unbearable. And you learn ultimately that actually it's not. You can bear it. And all sorts of extraordinary things happen within this thing that we call grief. That way of thinking is something that comes through time. It's not some sort of failure if you're not feeling that way. It takes a long time. It takes a long time, but beautiful things often do, you could say.
We'll be right back with actor, director, writer Ben Stiller, who spent the last few years going through the things his parents left behind. Welcome back. My guest today is actor, writer, and director Ben Stiller. His mom, Ann Mira, died in 2015, and his dad, Jerry Stiller, in 2020. They were a famous comedy duo, and Ben has spent the last several years going through and making a film about all the things they left behind. It's called Stiller and Mira, Nothing is Lost, and it's playing now on Apple TV. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
Really appreciate it.
Be here.
You and I have something in common, which is we both went through our parents' stuff. Did you wait a while to start going through stuff?
No. When my dad died...
He died in 2020.
In May of 2020, and like a week or two after that, I started going through stuff. I kind of got this like weird sort of like panic. It was the apartment I grew up in. It was the place we always went back to, and it's home. It felt like home base. So then to think about it not being in our family, and that was because they were leaving the apartment to my sister, and I knew she wanted to sell it. It was kind of like this knee-jerk reaction of like, I'm not going to remember this place fully. I want to just film it so
You
I
want to
can
document it.
Yeah, that was the instinct. I really am like a very visual person. So like just to have those visuals of the place, to be able to look at it and study it and kind of like just remember it, or if I was ever thinking of it, that was the main impetus. But then there was also of course, all this stuff of theirs.
Did you know that your dad had made cassette recordings of conversations? Did you know you had this library?
I didn't know we had all of these hundreds of hours of tapes that were a combination of cassette recordings, everything from my dad having like a little mini cassette recorder to record my kids, as a grandparent, to going back to these reel-to-reel tapes that he would record their improvisation sessions that they would do to write their sketches.
I did this by myself, going through these boxes, and I found it, that's the reason I started this podcast, because I found it to be such a kind of lonely and fraught process.
It's so heavy.
Of opening up these boxes.
Even talking about it.
Yes.
It's like, when I start thinking about it, it's just there's so much stuff there that like every single piece, whether it's a photograph or like a cufflink or, these like little like tchotchkes and things that like just ended up in like the drawer by my mom's bedside table. Every single one of them would kind of take you down like a whole avenue of memory, or
everything is infused with memory.
Yeah, that sort of feeling like it's a piece of them or a connection. I'm like trying on some glasses, and they're my mother's father's glasses. And that suitcase that we have is my mom's father's suitcase that she had saved. That I'd never looked at before. But the glasses I find very personal because that's something that someone wore every day.
And their eyes looked through that into your eyes.
Yeah. And then they become these artifacts. They're part of your parents. I don't know. There's something just very heavy about that too.
My basement is still full of these boxes, and I just have not.
It's really.
I just can't do it. Like
well,
I do it in bits.
It's kind of like a crazy Sisyphean type of thing.
Yes, yeah.
Because you're like always. I like go through stuff, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to put this stuff over here and this stuff over here, but. Then it's also like, then what? What am I going to do with that?
Yeah.
And then, like, how do you dig into that stuff too? How do you start that process? Because when you start to listen to a tape, that's like an hour of my parents improvising and talking.
I mean, there must be thousands of hours of recording.
I know there's hundreds that we found, and that really takes you down the rabbit hole. It's something fascinating to me about hearing just the sounds of the apartment and the phone ringing in the background or things like that make it feel so real and in the moment.
Well, also seeing those old Super 8 films that your dad shot, I mean, it's so New York circa 1972, 73.
Yeah.
I had the same jacket you wore. Like there was snow on the streets and snow days and just funky sneakers and
snow days were exciting.
Hair, big hair and just messiness. And, we watched Wonderama.
Yeah, I went to Wonderama once.
Every kid who would go to Wonderama would get a glazed bagel with their name on a necklace.
Right.
And they would always wear it to school and they'd be like, I was at Wonderama.
Yeah.
And I never got to go to Wonderama. I was But it's interesting because part of the thing for me in going through these boxes, which is really difficult, and I'll take a box and I'll think, okay, I'm going to make progress today. I'm going to do a box. And it's a box of Christmas cards from 1974. How meaningful can this be? And I'm going through it. And then some of it are people who I knew, and I remember Walter Matthau. His wife, Carol, was my mom's best friend.
Oh, really?
Una Chaplin and Charlie Chaplin's Christmas cards. And
see, that's incredible.
Like, what do you do with that stuff? Because everything feels like a piece of my mom or my dad or my past.
Right.
And yet it's not.
Right. Yeah. It's hard. Like you start to organize stuff and then you're like, well, what is this? Then what do I do with this? Ultimately, I think it's, I hear my dad's voice in my head when I'm doing it because he was very much about saving stuff. It's funny though, because it gets exhausting too in the moment when you're doing it. I think after a little while, it just gets tiring too because
you have to stop after a while.
And then you're like, well, and then you start to get like a little bit like, I guess like, do I keep the Charlie Chaplin Christmas card or not? I don't know. No, let's put it in other words, you like get a little wiped out in the moment and you kind of forget even like how much this, it's like you just keep all this stuff. It's great to have it. And then you do find, I think, the little things that mean something to you.
I've come to the realization I'm trying to make sense of what happened. Like, what was this entire experience of growing up in the family that I grew up in, that's so in my mind, like saturated with colors and the smell of Rego candles and cigarettes and clinking glasses and people drinking and
So funny. I have so many similar
and like parties at the house and
Parties
like
at the house,
famous
caterers.
people who you see on television suddenly in your house. My parents gave, when Charlie Chaplin came back to America after being in exile to receive a Special Academy Award, he and Una flew to New York first, and my parents gave him a big welcome party. And there's a photo in the New York Times of me shaking Charlie Chaplin's hand I was 6 or 7 years old.
Wow. Did you know?
Yeah, they gave me a whole like course of study of we watched Charlie Chaplin films, but of course he looked nothing like the Little Tramp. So I was like, oh, who's this old guy? But for you, was it a sad thing to do this?
I think ultimately, even if you feel a little closer or you learn something, you are left feeling the sadness of, I still miss them. And all of this searching and all of this connecting or making a movie or writing about it or anything, ultimately, at the end of the day, you're still dealing with just the reality of what it is to be a human being and not have people around who you loved. For me, making the movie, the first 2.5 years of working on it were not like very happy. There were so many times when I didn't want to really deal with going into that stuff.
Yeah.
Because when you do go into it, it brings up the different feelings. I think both of our childhoods, we were around adults a lot who were partying and living their lives in that way that parents in the 70s did, which was, for us as kids, it's like we had to figure it out on our own.
Yeah, my mom took me to Studio 54 when I was 11, twice.
So, I went to Studio 54 when I was 13.
No.
This is so weird. It was like letting children into Studio 54, basically.
I'm obsessed with the patterns of history that run through families and how we find ourselves repeating the patterns of those who come before us. You grew up with these parents who were working constantly, who needed to work to support the family. They were on the road a lot.
Yeah.
And then you had kids, and you ended up repeating the pattern of your parents with your kids.
I did, yeah. And I think about how that happened, because always being aware of thinking, I don't want to make mistakes that my parents made or things they did as parents that weren't, the best. But I think for me, what happened is like my relationship with my work, it became very important to me and probably like out of balance with really attending to all the relationships in my life.
I well understand the perspective you have about your work. It is the same I have, and it is very difficult for anybody around me. I get laser focused, and I'm a perfectionist. Like, it's so obvious the way it has to be, and nothing else is acceptable.
Right.
And no one else understands this. I'm just trying to make it perfect. That's all I want.
Yeah, these are the people in your life who love you.
These are the people in your life. Exactly.
And then once the work goes away and when you're old and on your deathbed, these are the people you hope are around.
Yeah, and they're not going to be around. I want to be present in the lives of my kids. Yeah. And yet I watch this and I realize it's not enough to think that and to realize that. You actually have to work on it every single day and take action on it.
Which I think is an advantage when you do have kids, when you're not, like super young, because...
What are you saying? Yeah, I'm 58. Okay, fine. I know. I started late.
No, you got it together. No, but like I wasn't super young myself. Like I was like 35 or 30, right? That's not really young to have kids. But even then, I think if I had them now, it would be a whole different thing because I think I do have a little more self-awareness in that area. Or maybe it's because I learned it through trial and error. But there was a blind spot for me. As much as I had these ideas about my parents and what they got right and what they didn't get right, it didn't jibe with my ambitions or my creative drive. I didn't understand that I was actually doing the same thing, That's the thing like that I'm kind of like, wow, that's really like I really missed that.
There's a conversation you have in the film with your son. Let's play that.
Okay.
After a tough day, or something was going wrong, you can get very much in your own head, you know what I mean? And I think once you kind of go into that place, hard to get you out of it. So that would kind of put a damper on the, fun part about being on vacation. You know what I mean? You have all these hats that you're trying to balance, Right. being a director, an actor, you know, a producer, a writer, but also just like a father, right? And sometimes I felt that would come, you know, last to these other things.
The irony is I thought I was doing so much better than my parents. I thought I was pulling it off. I was flying home on the weekends and having special places for the kids to play when they come visit the set. But in reality, and just hearing them talk about it, you know, for them, it was the same thing I was going through as a kid. And I just couldn't see that at all at the time.
I find that devastating.
Yeah, even when I listened to it, I'm like, I was not expecting him to say last when he said, you know, I thought he was going to say like maybe like not at the top of the, when he said last. It was like, but like, look, it's valid because that's his experience. We all learn as you have kids and they get older that kids take in everything we took in as kids, they're taking in.
That scene made me think, my 5-year-old, what is he going to say in 20 years?
Right.
I'm actively thinking, okay, what do I need to do now? I mean, I feel like I've made
But the fact that you're asking those questions, honestly, that's all you can do. You know what I mean?
Well, you can do more than that. You can actually change
of course, you can actually change it. Well, let's not go too far. But even to be aware of it is the key, you know? And all you can do is do the best you can.
But that perfectionism is something your dad had as well.
100%, yeah. Almost all the time, I feel like he was in his head, which, again, I really identify with.
There's a conversation that he recorded between your mom and him. It's essentially an argument where your mom is saying, and we'll play in a second, that he's just joyless, that he's so perfectionist that he sucks the joy out of everything.
I know the work and how people respond to you and how great your performances are under these conditions, no matter what. You are always there. I know all this. I'm aware of it.
And then, at the end, when things go halfway decently, your relief is embarrassing. It's like you're just, oh God, it was so great. It was so, you know. How do you go over how you're thought of as a good guy?
I do want to be thought of as a good guy, yes.
That clutters your mind.
No, it doesn't clutter my mind, and we're looked upon very lovingly by people. Nobody's walking out there looking
at one thing.
What?
Before either of us leave this planet, there has to be some way you can get an authentic sense of yourself without worrying how you're perceived. It is joyless. Absolutely joyless.
And I have been accused of this as well. And I agree.
Me too. Yeah. And I agree too. Like that what hit me when I heard her say that was also like, yeah, I've had that feeling sometimes when I stress out about something so much. Like doing something on the Oscars or something where it's like a pressure moment to be funny or deliver, which is, I don't love doing those kinds of things because of that. Because what happens is I stress out so much about it that, you know, and then if it goes well, it's literally what she says. I'm just relieved. But it's not like I'm happy, like, oh, it was great. It's like, no, I'm relieved. I think my mom was also responding to like her relationship with my dad in terms of how he was with people. Because he was incredibly outgoing and generous and genuine in his interest in other people and connecting with people and wanting people, as he says, to like him, which again, like a very human thing that I really identify with too. But my dad, he didn't have any issues to say, yeah, I want everybody to love me because I didn't really get loved when I was a kid, you know?
We'll have more with Ben Stiller in a moment. If you want to listen or watch past episodes of this podcast, you can do that wherever you get your podcasts or at our grief community page at cnan.com/allthereis. You can also watch our new weekly companion show there, All There Is Live, Thursday nights at 9:15 p.m. Eastern. We'll be right back with more from Ben Stiller. Do you feel like you grieved your parents?
I still feel like I'm going through that. I have these like moments of it's, you know, I think making the movie for me was a way to address connecting with my grief because I have such a barrier towards really opening up to that, I think. And maybe similar to you in that way where, like, if you made a documentary about your mom, your process in making this podcast, like, you can take what you do and use it as a way to help yourself work through stuff. And I actually think that that's a lot of what art is and creativity is. It shouldn't be indulgent self-therapy or whatever that nobody wants to see. And by the way, that was a concern I had too in making the movie. But I do think that being able to do this and have a way to delve into it through quote unquote work or, creative process was a way in for me to like start to connect with them. And now what I think it's opened up is I have these moments by myself where I try to connect with my parents a little bit.
Do you feel them?
I have.
Do you feel anything?
No, that's the issue.
No, I'm joking. But look, I'm saying this as somebody.
Sometimes I do, but a lot of times
when I see it, because
I've
I've spent my life not feeling anything.
Well, if you're like me, it's like somebody's going through life. You have to kind of like put up the deflector shields, right?
Yes. No,
but the problem is you get used to having them up, and then when you let them down. But yes, I've had these weird moments, little spiritual kind of connection moments that I like. They sound so silly, but like of a moment when you meet somebody or something and you feel like you're somehow connecting with your parent. Have you ever had that?
Yeah.
I was at West Point scouting for a movie, West Point up the Hudson, and I knew my mom had gone to boarding school up there at a place called Lady Cliff Academy that was in Highland Falls, New York. And I had never been able to find it. And I was in the West Point Visitor Center, and I asked somebody, I said, hey, there's a place called Lady Cliff Academy. And he said, you're standing in it. This was Lady Cliff Academy. West Point bought it a few years ago, and it's part of their thing. And then this woman recognized me there, and she came up to me, and she was so happy to see me. She gave me this big hug, was just so excited, and I was in that place in that moment, and I felt like I was somehow connecting with my mother in that moment. And there are those types of things that happen every once in a while, but then for me, I can just like sort of sit with these images. I have like a screensaver on my computer of me and my mom when I was like 9 years old, and those are these kind of touchstones where I feel okay kind of just like going there and opening up and letting down the shields and just trying to be with them,
I stopped doing this podcast after the first season. It was just kind of overwhelming, and I had solicited voicemails from listeners, and we got calls from people about their grief. And I listened over the course of about 4 months. And I still wasn't going to do any more podcasts, but it made me go back down to the basement and start going through these boxes again, which I stopped. And the first box I opened up was a box of my dad's papers. He was a writer. And I randomly picked this box, and I opened up first file, and it was an essay called The Importance of Grieving that he had written. And it was about the importance of children grieving and what happens to kids who don't grieve and how they go through their life with a certain melancholy they can never quite put their finger on. I realized that's exactly what I had done. I had shut down as a kid, and my entire life was spent keeping the grief buried. And it made me realize I need to actually grieve. I need to actually allow myself to feel. And that's what I've been doing the last 2 years. And it's been life-changing. It's been extraordinary, but very difficult.
That feels like literally like him kind of reaching.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those moments
But that's that's almost undeniable.
Yeah.
How do you do that in terms of letting yourself feel stuff?
Doing this podcast, talking to people, just learning from other people how to grieve. I mean, I literally am trying to learn how to grieve.
Love to.
It's been incredible. I mean, Stephen Colbert.
Can you tell me what you learned?
Stephen Colbert introduced me to the idea of grief as a gift and learning to love the thing you most wish had never happened. There's a guy, Francis Weller, who's talked about developing a companionship with grief, and this notion that others have taught me that you can still have a relationship with somebody who's died. And my relationship with my dad has changed. I know my dad better now than I ever did before. I've read his letters, and you know your dad better now than you did when he was alive because you've read everything there is.
I definitely agree with that. that I feel like the people who are really close to you and that have made an impact and are a part of you, those relationships go on and continue. I know because how much I think about them or the conversations I have in my head with them. But overall, I think the relationship with my parents has become I'm much more connected and interested. And now, besides being this age and being able to look at, them through the eyes of having gone through a lot of experiences and having a lot more empathy for them, I just kind of also like can really appreciate them. And maybe like 5 times a week, people will come up to me about my parents saying like, this happened to me, your dad did this for me, your mom said this to me, your mom told me to fuck off this time or whatever, because she had I always have like a story of my mom saying to somebody, oh, get the fuck out of here. Because she loved to, sort of test people that way. But she feels so alive. She's such a interesting, smart. I have such an appreciation for her and my dad. I do feel like it's opened up a conversation with people, like the way you're talking to people. But I think it's also the understanding a little bit more what it is to be a person, and that I feel better. I feel a little better about all of it, because it's out in the open.
Well, even talking about, your mom's drinking.
Exactly. Once I saw that it actually was like kind of opening up these conversations with people about their own experiences, which you were saying.
Which, by the way, are conversations that are sorely needed and people are desperate to have, but it's just not something we really allow in society. It's just not something we hold space for.
No,
to use a cliche.
Especially in television too. That's why the other part I was really fascinated with making the movie was the archival 70s interviews, Gene Shalit, all those, Mike Douglas, all those people, like the stuff. David Susskind, these conversations that people would have on TV in that era were much more real.
Yeah.
And that is the stuff that nobody talks about. Like, you can't talk about death, really, on a TV talk. I love Jimmy Fallon, but like, I'm not going to talk about death on The Tonight Show. And you go out and you want to have fun and be funny, but like the minute something comes up in your head, we go like, oh, that's something about a disease or death or something. It's like, oh, I can't talk about that.
Well, it's funny. I do New Year's Eve with Andy Cohen.
Yes, you do.
And he's always like, okay, and he's very much programming the whole thing. And so he'll be like, okay, we'll do your grief 2 minutes. You get 2 minutes on grief. Do your grief thing.
What's Andy's relationship with grief? That's what I want.
He's the happiest person I've ever met. I mean, he's thankfully both his parents are there and they're amazing. Yeah. But it's interesting to me because on New Year's Eve, I will talk about grief because as a child, I was watching the Dick Clark ball drop. My dad was in a hospital in 1978. I was 10 years old and he died 5 days later. And I remember watching the ball drop and just knowing something terrible was going to happen in this new year. And me mentioning it the minute or two that Andy allows me to on New Year's Eve, I cannot tell you the people who have reached out to me saying, you know what, I was watching the ball drop and really sad, and it's such a difficult night, and it meant so much that you said this thing about, I see you out there if you're missing somebody. And I'm sure you will find that as more people see the film, just people coming up to you and talking about your parents to you, and it opens up a conversation, which is actually the most meaningful conversations I have. And I get to have them all day long because people literally stop me everywhere I go to talk about people they've lost. And it's beautiful.
It's so valuable.
Do you have any regrets? Because there's a recording that your dad made of he and your mom talking, and your mom just gotten off the phone with you, and she's sad, and she's like, oh, he was clipped. And your dad was like, what, he didn't want to talk to you? Which made me feel bad about not spending more time with my mom.
Yeah. That was actually one of the most uncomfortable things for me to hear when I found that. Because that was being like you're in the bathroom in high school and hear someone talking about, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yet they're talking about their son.
And it's your parents.
I know, and they're talking about like their son doesn't really want to hang out with them. But the thing is, I don't feel sad for that. I feel bad that I was not able to like really appreciate, I feel bad that I was so not self-aware or like so wrapped up in my own stuff at the time. Now, with a 20-year-old and a almost 24-year-old. I'm lucky when I get a call from them during the week that they actually even want to talk or hang out because they're doing their own thing. So it is a natural thing that happens, but I really kind of go more to like, oh God, I was so wrapped up in the work at that point. It was probably like what my son said. I would get in my head and would, disappear a little bit.
You had like advanced prostate cancer that you found out about and had to have surgery for. Did that make you think about your mortality?
Oh my God, yeah. When you get a diagnosis like that, everything stops, All your plans, all your thoughts, my job, it's like all of it's like, wait a minute, this is something that could change everything. It was scary, definitely scary. Nothing like the feeling of relief when you get the call from the doctor, hey, the blood test came back, your PSA is 0, you're cancer-free, and you want to hold on to that feeling. For me, I think it's 11 years now. That feeling of gratitude. And I still do have that, but of course, like it goes up and down, you get wrapped up in things. But what I find even more kind of disturbing though is like I hear about people my age. Bill Burr has a funny routine about people just dropping dead. Like this age, like guys in like 50s, 60s would just drop dead. That's very disconcerting because again, it's like we have all these plans and ideas and things we're doing, but it all could just be like, no, yeah, it's over. And honestly, like if it was over tomorrow, it wouldn't be like, oh yeah, he died kind of young, but he had a life. Right?
Ben Stiller, thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Ben Stiller's film about his parents, Stiller and Mira, Nothing is Lost, is out now. You can watch it on Apple TV. Next week, my conversation with actor Kelsey Grammer, whose 18-year-old sister Karen was murdered when Kelsey was 20. We talk about her loss and others he's experienced and the role that grief has played in his life.
There was always a note of tragedy in my life. Karen's murder was so horrible and so overwhelming that I couldn't do anything but keep it with me. It stayed beside me for a long time. And even though I would still have moments when I would like live very well and happily, and it would always come sneaking back in. And I think that's okay.
That's next week on All There Is.